The first scream did not sound like a scream. It sounded like a balloon popping, and for one full second, nobody moved, because a carnival is built out of noises that are supposed to startle you and then turn out to be fun. Then came the second pop, and the smoke, gray and sour, rolling low across the grass between the ring toss booth and the dunk tank, and 300 people remembered all at once that they had legs. I had a 6-year-old's hand wrapped around 2 of my fingers before I even decided to move. Her name was Poppy. I did not know that yet. I knew she had been standing alone at the face painting table 40 seconds earlier, glitter half-brushed onto one cheekbone in the shape of a star, while the woman who was supposed to be watching her turned to check a radio clipped inside her jacket. I knew the crowd was folding toward the exits like a held breath finally letting go, and that a child that size, in a crowd that size, disappears in under 4 seconds. I had read that number in a training manual 2 years ago and never forgotten it. 4 seconds. I did not have 4 seconds, so I did not use them thinking. I got low, got the girl against my chest, got us both under the plywood lip of the dunk tank platform where the crowd's legs went around us instead of through us, and I put my mouth against her glitter-dusted hair and said the only thing that came out true and steady. "Hold on to me." I don't let go. She held on hard enough to bruise. Good. Bruised was alive. My name is Ren Holloway. I was 27 years old that afternoon, an Omega who had presented 4 years later than everyone in my graduating class, and weaker than all of them too, a scent so faint the clinic nurse once told my mother, not unkindly, that some Omegas just come in quiet. Quiet was the polite word, the word my old paramedic cohort used, back when I still had a cohort, was defective, murmured at me across a break room table by a beta who thought I couldn't hear him over the vending machine. I had been 11 credits from my certification when my mother's lungs started failing faster than her savings could keep up with, and I had put the manual down and picked up a diner apron instead, because rent doesn't care about your training hours. 2 years of double shifts. 6 months since the funeral. I still worked the first aid tent at every county fundraiser I could get assigned to, unpaid, because it was the only place my hands still remembered what they were for. Under the dunk tank, counting the girl's pulse against my wrist without meaning to, I heard the crowd noise change register, not screaming anymore. Shouting, men's voices, close and clipped, the particular flat urgency of people who are professionally afraid rather than ordinarily afraid, and I understood before I saw a single face that whoever this child belonged to had money enough to employ panic as a job description. Poppy. The name cracked across the field like a whip. The woman who came around the dunk tank moved like weather arriving. Black coat, unhurried stride that somehow ate the ground faster than anyone else's running, and a stillness in her face that the chaos around her seemed to part for instead of touch. I registered her scent before I registered anything else about her. Iron and storm dark pine, cold enough to raise the hair on my arms, and under it, so faint I almost missed it, the sour thread of real fear. Alphas did not usually let fear show in their scent. This one wasn't managing to hide it. She dropped to her knees in the mud in a coat that probably cost more than my mother's entire hospital bill, and Poppy let go of my fingers to launch herself into her arms. And for 3 full seconds, nobody in that circle of overturned popcorn and trampled paper flags said anything at all. Then the woman looked at me over her daughter's shoulder, and her eyes did the thing eyes do when they are deciding whether to be grateful or suspicious, and landed, slowly, on grateful. You got her under cover before my own people did. It wasn't a question. Her voice was low and even, built for rooms that went quiet when she entered them. I used to train for this, I said. Sort of. Sort of, she repeated, like she was turning the word over to check its weight. Two men in dark suits arrived at a dead run, breathing hard, radios crackling, and the woman stood without seeming to spend any effort on it, Poppy still hooked around her hip. "Where were you?" she said to them, and it was not loud. It didn't need to be. I watched both men age 5 years in the space of that sentence. I did not know yet that I was looking at the woman 3 newspapers had called, without ever printing her first name, the Widow Voss. I knew only that when she finally turned back to me, the fear-sour note under the pine had settled into something calmer, something that smelled almost like relief finding a place to stand. "What's your name?" she said. "Ren. Ren." She said it like she was filing it somewhere permanent. "Stay exactly there." I stayed exactly there, in the mud, glitter transferred from a stranger's cheek to my collarbone, and watched the Widow Voss turn to face down 100 fleeing carnival goers and a security detail that had failed her daughter, and understood, distantly, underneath the adrenaline, that my ordinary Saturday had just ended and something else had begun in its place. The smoke turned out to be 2 commercial fog cartridges and a string of firecrackers, cheap, untraceable, planted under the funnel cake trailer by someone who had known exactly where the Voss security perimeter's blind corner was. Nobody said the word bomb out loud in front of Poppy. Everybody was thinking it. They put me in the back of a car I had not agreed to get into, though nobody forced me. Exactly. Nadia Frost, the woman running the detail, simply opened the door and said, "She wants a word," in a tone that made refusing feel like a technical possibility rather than a real one. Nadia had a jaw like a closed fist and eyes that cataloged me from boots to hairline in under 2 seconds and clearly filed me under problem. Poppy rode in my lap the whole way because she had decided, apparently, permanently, that I was hers now. She had glitter in her eyelashes and a paper crown someone had made her at the ring toss, and she informed me, with the total confidence of a 6-year-old, that my hair looked like the good kind of brown, like a horse, and that I was going to come see her fish. "I don't think that's up to me, sweetheart," I said. "It's up to my mom," Poppy said. "She decides everything. Except my fish. The fish are mine." Rosalind Voss sat across from us and did not look up from her phone the entire ride, and I understood within about 4 minutes that this was not rudeness. It was triage. Her thumb moved fast and flat over the screen, canceling something, rerouting something, and twice I caught her jaw working, like she was chewing down words she did not want her daughter to hear. When she finally did look up, it was to study the fading press of my fingers still faintly bruised across Poppy's forearm, where I'd gripped too hard under the dunk tank, and something crossed her face that was not gratitude exactly. It was closer to grief remembering itself. "You put yourself between my daughter and a threat you didn't understand," she said. "Most people freeze. You didn't. Most people haven't spent 6 months of Saturdays running triage drills on strangers' kids for free," I said, and immediately wondered if that sounded like bragging. It came out more like an apology. Why would you do that? Not gently. Genuinely, I could have given her the short version. I gave her the true one instead, because something about the flat black quiet of her eyes made lying feel like a waste of both our time. Because I almost finished paramedic school, and then my mother got sick, and then she died, and the only way I know how to keep her with me is to keep the training alive, even though nobody's paying me for it anymore. The car was quiet long enough that Poppy fell half asleep against my shoulder, thumb drifting toward her mouth before Rosalind gently pulled it back down without looking, an old reflex. "I'm going to offer you a job," Rosalind said finally. "You're going to want to say no. Say yes anyway." We crossed onto Vossland 40 minutes later, past a gate with cameras I counted without meaning to, 9 that I could see, and up a drive lined with black oaks into a house lit gold against the coming evening, and I sat in the back of a stranger's car with a sleeping child drooling faintly onto my sleeve, and thought, I am not equipped for whatever this is. I was wrong. I was exactly equipped for it. I just didn't know that yet. The estate ate my old life in the space of a single tour. Mrs. Abernathy, the housekeeper, walked me through it the next morning with the patient narration of a woman who had clearly done this before for other people who didn't stay. The East Wing, the library that had not seen a duster in a week and would not tolerate one longer. The kitchen with a stove that cost more than my mother's funeral. You'll be in the rooms off the nursery, she said, close enough to hear Poppy if she calls out. Madam insisted. Madam, that was what the staff called her. Never Rosalind, not out loud, not where it could be overheard, though I noticed the guards said ma'am with a hard flat A that sounded almost like a rank. I found out what she actually was on my 3rd day, from Josie, over the phone, because my best friend had never once in her life let me stay ignorant of something she could Google. Wren, Josie's voice had the particular hush of someone reading a screen and talking at the same time. The widow Voss. Voss Logistics. You know what that's a front for, right? I figured it wasn't just shipping pallets. It is extremely not just shipping pallets. Her wife died 18 months ago. Car bomb. They never caught who did it. You are living in a Mafia queen's house, Wren Holloway, and you texted me a photo of monogrammed hand towels like that was the headline. The word Mafia sat strange and heavy where I'd been keeping the word grief. I thought of the sour fear thread under her pine and iron scent at the carnival, of the way her jaw had worked in the car like she was chewing glass, and understood that both things could be true of the same woman at once. Feared, frightened, not opposites. Sometimes the same coin, flipped by circumstance. The household did not love me. Nadia watched me over her coffee every morning like I was a stain that hadn't finished setting, and one of the senior men, a broad, soft-spoken consigliere everyone called Uncle Cal, though his actual name was Callum Doyle, made a point of standing very close to me in doorways and asking, with a smile that never touched his eyes, how a diner girl had landed herself into the good rooms so fast. I shielded her daughter from a smoke bomb, I told him the first time. That's the whole story. He looked at me the way you look at a receipt you suspect is wrong. Omegas usually cost less to buy than that, in my experience. I didn't have an answer for that one that wouldn't have gotten me fired, so I just held his gaze until he was the one who looked away first, and something in his smile thinned, filed me. I would later understand. Under threat instead of amusement. Rosalind, for her part, treated me like a puzzle she had not decided whether to solve. She was unfailingly correct with me in public. Miss Holloway, thank you. That will be all. And something else entirely when it was just us and Poppy in the kitchen at 7 at night, elbow deep in flour, because Poppy had declared imperiously that Wren made pancakes better than the chef, which was not remotely true, and also not something I was going to correct. You don't have to do this every night, Rosalind said, watching me flip a pancake that came out approximately the shape of Ohio. She asked. She asks for a lot of things. I don't grant all of them. You're granting this one. Something almost like a smile moved through her face and didn't quite land. I'm observing this one, she said, and reached past me for the syrup, and her wrist brushed mine, and I felt it travel up my arm like a struck match. She smelled, up close, like rain about to break, that cold pine sharpening, and under it, warmer than I expected, something like wood smoke. I wondered, stupidly, whether she could smell me back. My scent had always been too faint for anyone to bother naming. Toasted almond, my mother used to say, before I got old enough to be embarrassed by being described at all. Toasted almond and orange blossom, so quiet most people didn't register it as a scent at all, just a general impression of warmth in a room. "You're staring," Rosalind said, not moving her wrist away. "You're standing very close for someone who calls me Miss Holloway in front of the staff. The staff isn't here." She looked, for the first time since I'd met her, almost unsure of something. "Does it bother you? The closeness?" "No," I said, honestly, and watched that land in her like weather clearing. Poppy, delighted to be forgotten in the middle of the kitchen with a bowl of batter, took the opportunity to smear flour across both their faces and declare it a family photo, and whatever had been building in the quiet between us broke apart into laughter instead, and I thought, this is the most dangerous house I have ever stood in, and I have never in my life felt safer inside one. I should have known better than to think both those things could be true for long. The message came 4 nights later, slid under my bedroom door sometime after midnight. No envelope, just a single folded sheet of the estate's own stationery, and 6 words typed in the exact center of the page. "Ask her what happened to Elena." I did not sleep the rest of that night. I sat with the light on and the paper on my knees and turned the name Elena over and over, because I had never heard anyone in that house say it. Not Poppy, not Mrs. Abernathy, not Rosalind. There was a photograph in the library, a woman with Poppy's exact chin, laughing at something outside the frame, and I had assumed, and never asked, and now somebody wanted me asking. I brought it to Rosalind at breakfast, because I did not know how to sit on it, and because whoever had left it clearly wanted a reaction from one of us, and I was tired of being a chess piece I couldn't see the board for. Her face did not change when she read it. That was the frightening part. It went still the way still water goes still right before something breaks the surface. "Where did you get this?" "Under my door." "Last night." "Did you see who left it?" No, she folded the paper once, precisely along its existing crease, and set it down with a care that felt like violence being redirected. "Elena was my wife," she said. "Poppy's mother. She died 18 months ago in a car meant for me. Whoever sent you this wants you to be afraid of this house. I would like you to tell me instead of them why they thought that would work." "I don't scare that easy," I said, which was mostly true. "Good," Rosalind said. "Because I don't think it was a stranger who put that under your door. Strangers don't get past my gate." That sentence sat between us like a held breath for the rest of the day. It was Nadia who found the print, a single partial, off the underside of the stationery box in the library, matched by afternoon to a set of prison-era prints on file from a man who'd done 6 years for racketeering under Rosalind's late father-in-law, and been quietly folded back into the organization on Callum Doyle's personal vouching 11 months ago. Callum's man, not Callum himself, not yet, not provably, but close enough that when Rosalind told me, standing in the doorway of my room that evening with her hand braced too hard against the frame, her voice had a flatness in it I hadn't heard before, like ice forming over something that used to move. "I trusted him with Elena's funeral arrangements," she said. "I trusted him with my daughter's birthday guest list. I am going to need you to understand that I do not survive by being wrong about people twice." "Then don't be wrong about him twice," I said. "Be right about him once, and be done." Something in her jaw loosened, just slightly at that, like she'd been waiting for permission to think the sentence herself. "You say that very easily for someone who could be standing next to me when it happens. I already stood next to your daughter when the smoke went off," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. Standing next to things is apparently my whole skill set." She almost smiled. It cost her something to let it show, and I understood, watching it happen, that I had just watched Rosalind Voss decide to trust me with a piece of herself she did not hand out casually, and the storm outside the window picked that exact moment to break. Rain coming down the glass in long silver ropes, and neither of us moved to close the curtain. The lockdown came 3 nights later, and it came fast. Nadia's voice over the house, calm at 2:47 in the morning, did not waste words. Perimeter breach, east fence, 2 unidentified. Madam, to the safe room. Now, I was already moving before I finished waking up, because some part of my body had apparently decided, without consulting me, that safe room meant Poppy's room first. I got there in under 30 seconds. I counted them, later lying awake replaying it, the way I counted everything when my hands needed something to hold onto instead of shaking, and found Rosalind already there, Poppy wrapped around her shoulder, half asleep and unafraid, because her mother's arms had apparently never once failed to feel like the safest place on earth. With me, Rosalind said, and I didn't need telling twice. The safe room was steel-doored and windowless, stocked like a bunker, and Rosalind sealed us into it with a hand that was, for the first time since I'd known her, not entirely steady. Poppy fell back asleep within minutes, curled between us on the narrow cot, and it was in the low red emergency light, with her daughter's breathing evening out under her palm, that Rosalind finally let her guard come all the way down. I keep waiting to stop being afraid, she said, so quietly I almost missed it under the hum of the air filtration. Every time the house goes dark, I think, this is the night it finally happens to her too. It's not going to. You can't promise me that. No, I agreed, but I can promise you I'll be between her and it if it tries. Her eyes came up to mine in the dim red light, and whatever composure she wore in daylight was entirely gone, and what was underneath it was raw and young and had been carrying something enormous for a very long time without setting it down. Elena used to say things like that, she said. Right before she got in the car. I'm not going to get in a car for you, Rosalind. I'm going to stay in the room. A sound came out of her that was almost a laugh, wet and startled, and she reached out and pressed her palm flat against my sternum, not pulling me closer, just resting it there like she needed to check I was solid. Your heart's going too fast for someone who claims she isn't scared. I didn't say I wasn't scared. I said I wasn't leaving. Tell me to stop, she said, low, her thumb tracing once along my collarbone and going still, and I will. Right now. No consequence. I need you to know that before anything else happens in this room. I'm not telling you to stop. Say it plainly. I need it plain. Don't stop, I said, and meant it with everything I had left after a night of running toward the sound of danger instead of away from it. And when she kissed me, it was careful, in a way that had nothing to do with hesitation, and everything to do with a woman who had learned, at catastrophic cost, exactly how much it could hurt to hold something you loved too loosely. We didn't go further than that, not with Poppy sleeping 3 feet away. Not that night. It didn't need to go further to change everything. When the all clear came at dawn, 2 intruders caught on the fence line, low level, paid, already talking to Nadia's people in a way that made their eyes slide guiltily off any mention of Callum's name. Rosalind walked me back to my room with her hand loosely laced through mine, and at the door she stopped and pressed her forehead briefly to mine and said, I don't know how to do this slowly. I've never had the luxury. Then don't, I said. Just do it honestly. She held my hand a moment longer, iron and pine, and underneath it now, something warmer that I understood, with a small, private thrill. Might be new, might be, impossibly, me. And then she let go and went to check on her daughter, and I stood in the doorway of a house under siege and felt absurdly, entirely happy. The weeks that followed were the best of my life, and I would trade almost none of them, even knowing what came after. Rosalind told me about Elena in pieces, the way people tell you the truth when they've been carrying it alone too long, not all at once, but at odd hours, over coffee, in the garden, once at 2 a.m, while Poppy's night light threw slow stars across the nursery ceiling, and we sat on the floor outside her door because neither of us wanted to leave her unwatched. Elena had been kind in a house that did not reward kindness. Elena had wanted out, someday, for Poppy's sake, and never gotten the someday. Rosalind had built a fortress around her grief in the shape of control, because control was the only language her father had ever taught her for love, and she had spent 18 months mistaking that fortress for strength. It isn't strength, she told me, turning a mug between her hands without drinking from it. I understand that now. Real strength would have let me grieve out loud instead of behind a locked door where Poppy couldn't see it. I told her about my mother in return, the years of double shifts, the paramedic certificate I never finished, the way I used to lie awake doing the math on hospital bills instead of sleeping, the particular loneliness of being an Omega whose scent was too faint for anyone to bother noticing, in a world that measured your worth in how loudly you announced yourself. I had never said all of it out loud to one person before. It came out of me in that hallway like something finally set down after being carried too far. Your scent isn't faint, Rosalind said when I finished. It's quiet. That's a different thing entirely. I've been able to find you in a room with my eyes closed since the second week you lived here. That's either the most romantic or most alarming thing anyone's ever told me. Both, she agreed, and for the first time I heard her laugh, really laugh, unguarded, a sound I understood immediately that this house had not heard in 18 months. And Poppy's door cracked open at the sound of it, sleepy and delighted, insisting she wanted to hear the joke too, and we spent the next hour on the nursery floor building a blanket fort while Poppy narrated, with total authority, exactly which stuffed animals were allowed to guard which corners. It was during that same week that Nadia handed me, without ceremony, a small case containing a proper sidearm and 2 weeks of range time already scheduled in my name. In 11 years, she said, gruffly, not quite meeting my eyes, I have never once seen her wait on anyone the way she waits on you at the top of the stairs every evening. So, you're not staff anymore. Learn to protect what you're standing next to properly, or I'll teach you myself, and I promise you'll prefer the range. It was the closest thing to a blessing I had ever gotten from a woman built entirely out of suspicion, and I understood exactly how much it cost her to say it. I remembered, too, the whistle. My old M training whistle cracked down one side that I still carried in my jacket pocket out of habit more than use, the one I'd had clenched in my fist under the dunk tank the day this all began, ready to blow it, and never gotten the chance to. Poppy found it one afternoon, going through my coat looking for gum, and declared it the bravest whistle in the whole world, and refused to give it back until I promised to teach her the 3-blast signal for help. Rosalind watched us practicing it across the lawn, her daughter's small chest heaving with the effort of a real, piercing blast, and something in her face went soft and unguarded, in a way I was starting to recognize as her most honest expression. We should have known better than to be that happy in a house Callum Doyle still had keys to. The call came on a Tuesday, while Rosalind was 40 minutes away at a warehouse audit that Callum himself had suggested, with an urgency that should have told us something the moment he suggested it. Poppy was gone from the garden inside of 90 seconds. 90 seconds, I know, because the last thing she'd said to me, laughing, chasing a moth toward the hedge line, was that she'd found a secret door, and I had turned to answer a text from Josie, and when I looked up, the hedge line was empty and the side gate, which should have required a code, stood open 6 inches, swinging. I do not remember deciding to run. I remember the whistle in my fist, 3 short blasts that brought Nadia's team across the lawn in under 20 seconds, and I remember the tire tracks in the soft mud by the gate, fresh, and a scrap of pink ribbon from Poppy's hair caught on the latch like the world's cruelest breadcrumb. Rosalind's voice on the phone, when Nadia reached her, did not sound like a person. It sounded like something being broken very slowly, on purpose by a hand that knew exactly where the fault lines were. "Find her," was all she said. "Find my daughter, and then find out which of you let this happen." I already knew which of them. So, I suspected, did she. They had Poppy for 6 hours and 11 minutes. I counted every one of them, sitting in Rosalind's study with a landline in my hand because Callum Doyle, greedy enough to overreach and stupid enough to underestimate a diner waitress who'd spent 2 years reading crime scenes as triage puzzles, had made exactly one mistake. He'd used the same low-level fence jumper crew from the estate breach 3 weeks earlier. And one of them, scared and cornered by Nadia's people at 4 in the afternoon, gave up the warehouse address in exchange for a promise of mercy he had no right to make, and Rosalind, standing over him with a stillness more frightening than any shout, honored anyway. "She stops being useful the second she's dead," Rosalind told him, ice flat. "I don't waste useful things." Where the warehouse smelled like motor oil and old rain, I went in with Rosalind's team, not because anyone gave me permission, but because nobody tried hard enough to stop me. And because I had spent 2 years training for exactly this kind of controlled chaos, and I was not going to sit in a study counting minutes while a 6-year-old who called my hair the good kind of brown sat frightened somewhere in the dark. We found her zip tied to a folding chair in a back office, glitter still faintly visible in the crease of one eyebrow, and Callum Doyle standing over her with a phone in his hand, mid-call, negotiating terms with Rosalind's own lieutenants for a hostile transfer of territory in exchange for the girl. He hadn't expected me to come through the side door first. Nobody watches the Omega. That was, I would think later, the whole design flaw in a man like Callum Doyle. He had spent his whole life underestimating what quiet people were capable of doing, while everyone watched the loud ones instead. "Miss Holloway," he said, almost amused, phone still raised. "You're a very long way from your diner." "You called me a broodmare in a doorway once," I said, moving slow, keeping my hands visible, keeping my body angled between him and the chair, the way I'd been trained to angle myself between a threat and a patient 100 times in drills that had never, until this moment, mattered this much. "I've been waiting for a chance to correct you. I did not have a weapon out. I had a whistle in one fist, and Poppy's wide, terrified eyes locked on mine, and I did the only thing my 2 years of half-finished training had actually prepared me for. I talked. Steady, low. The exact register you use on a scared patient, on Callum, on the 2 men flanking him, buying seconds, buying feet of distance. Until the door behind him came off its hinges under Nadia's shoulder, and Rosalind walked through it with a stillness that made every man in that room understand, instantly and completely, that whatever was about to happen to Callum Doyle was going to be very, very quiet. She had him on his knees in under 10 seconds. I watched something in her face go somewhere I had never seen it go, somewhere that had buried Elena 18 months ago and never fully climbed back out of the grave with her, and her hand closed around a fistful of Callum's collar with a grip that promised he was not walking out of that warehouse unless she chose it, and for one long, terrible second, I understood that Rosalind Voss was fully capable of becoming. Right there, the exact thing this life had built her to be. Rosalind, I said it plain, not a shout. The same register I'd used on Callum, on Poppy, on every frightened thing I'd ever knelt beside. She's watching. Poppy, still zip-tied, still shaking, was watching, wide-eyed, the mother she loved most in the world standing over a man with murder written into every line of her body. Rosalind's hand did not loosen right away. But her eyes flicked to her daughter, and something in her cracked open and let the mercy back in, and she set Callum down, hard, onto the concrete instead of through it, and stepped back, breathing like she'd run a mile. "Cut her loose," she said to Nadia, voice raw. "Cuff him. Alive matters more to me than what he deserves. Today it does." It was, I understood, the single hardest sentence she had ever had to mean. The sit-down happened 9 days later, in a room I was not technically permitted in and attended anyway, at Rosalind's own insistence, because she said, flat, final, daring anyone to argue, that the woman who had walked into that warehouse for her daughter had earned a seat at every table that mattered from now on. 6 family heads sat around that table, men and women whose names carried the same weight as gunfire in certain rooms, and Rosalind laid the ledgers out in front of them, one at a time. Callum's skimmed shipments, the fence crew's paper trail leading straight back to accounts he thought were buried, and, worst of all, a recorded call, 18 months old, in which Callum Doyle had confirmed the exact route and time of a car he knew Rosalind would be riding in, sold to a rival family for a price that turned out, in the end, to be Elena's life instead of hers. The room went silent in a way I understood, now, that only real, permanent consequences could produce. "You sold my wife's route for $40,000, Rosalind said, and her voice did not shake once. "You called my daughter Poppy Girl at her own birthday party 4 months later. I trusted you with both of them." Callum, cuffed, flanked, still trying to find an angle even now, sneered the way men like him always sneer when the ground has already gone out from under them. "She's an Omega who waited tables. You handed her your empire over a smoke bomb I paid $200 for. She shielded a child you tried to sell for parts," Rosalind said. "You are going to spend the rest of your life understanding exactly how much more that was worth than anything you ever built." They did not kill him. That decision, I would learn, belonged as much to me as to any ledger. Rosalind had asked me, quietly, the night before, what I wanted done with him, and I had told her the truth, that I wanted him alive and utterly powerless, stripped of every account, every allegiance, every scrap of the respect he'd spent a lifetime accumulating, handed over whole and breathing to the federal task force that had been building a case against half that table for years, so that he would spend the next several decades exactly as small as he had always tried to make other people feel. It was the mercy that cost the room its taste for calling her soft, and the sentence that cost Callum Doyle everything else. When the room finally emptied, Rosalind found me in the hallway outside, and for a long moment neither of us said anything at all. Then she took both my hands in hers, iron and pine and something warmer, now permanently threaded through it, and said, in front of Nadia, in front of the last of the family heads still filing out, without a single flicker of hesitation, "I love you. I have loved you since a smoke bomb went off in a field and you didn't run. Ask me to stop, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I heard you. I am asking you instead." "Ask me what?" I said, though I already knew. "Be mine." "Properly, bonded," claimed, "whatever word this life makes you say out loud in front of people who matter, I don't care which one. I only care that it's true. Tell me to stop," I said back, softly, because it felt like the only fair answer to give a woman who had spent her whole life learning that love and control were the same thing, and was right there in that hallway, choosing to learn otherwise. And I won't. Not now, not ever. Don't stop. She didn't. Her mouth found mine, and her hand found the back of my neck, careful even now, even certain. And somewhere down the hall, I heard Nadia mutter something that might have been relief, and might have been, "I told you so." And neither of us cared which. The bonding happened in the garden, 6 weeks later, under the same hedge-line Poppy had once vanished behind and reappeared from, because Rosalind had said, simply, that she wanted every frightening place in this life reclaimed by something good before she'd let herself be happy in it. Poppy insisted on carrying the whistle down the aisle on a small satin pillow instead of rings. Because she informed the entire assembled guest list with total gravity. It's the bravest thing we have, so it should go first. And nobody argued with her, least of all the efficient. The vows were short. Rosalind had never been a woman of excess words, and I had spent a lifetime learning that the truest things I knew fit in very few of them. "I found you holding my daughter," she said, "and I have not stopped being grateful for a single day since. I am not always going to know how to be soft. I am always going to try, for you and for her, and I am never again going to mistake control for love." I told her that I had spent my whole life being the quiet one in every room, easy to overlook, easy to underestimate, and that she was the first person who had ever looked at my quiet and called it a kind of strength instead of a kind of lack. When the bond snapped into place between us, that sudden, floor-dropping certainty of another person's true feeling, arriving all at once, unfiltered, permanent, I felt 18 months of her grief finally exhale, all the way out. For the first time since a car she should have been in had gone up in flame instead of her wife's. Nadia gave a toast so gruff and short it made the whole garden laugh. Something about 11 years of watching Rosalind Voss wait on no one, followed at last, mercifully, by someone worth waiting for. Josie cried through the entire ceremony and loudly informed 3 separate Mafia lieutenants that she had known me since the diner, and this was, and she quoted herself precisely, an insane glow-up, no offense. A year on, the whistle hangs on a ribbon over Poppy's bed, repainted gold at her own insistence, official guardian of the room. Callum Doyle sits in a federal facility 1,100 miles from anyone who ever called him Uncle. The diner manager who once told me, in front of customers, that omegas who couldn't finish paramedic school shouldn't bother reapplying anywhere that mattered, sent a card when the papers ran the Voss Foundation's new Community EMT scholarship, named, at Rosalind's insistence, for my mother, and I never wrote back. Because some doors close on their own and don't need help. Some mornings I still wake before either of them, before the light has fully cleared the hedge line, and I lie there listening to Rosalind breathe slow, and even beside me, to Poppy's small feet already thundering down the hall toward our door, because she has decided, some mornings, that waiting for breakfast is beneath her. I watch the light come up gold across the window where a whistle used to hang before it found a truer home over a child's bed, and I think about a girl who spent 27 years being told her quiet made her small. It was never smallness. It was the sound of someone learning, all along, exactly how loud a person can be without ever once raising her voice. The end.